We've read so much about Chinese tech companies, sort of taking over from Apple and Google and Microsoft, and honestly, many of them have been quite hampered by the restrictions that have been placed on them, mostly by the U.S. government. There is, it seems to me, very little Chinese soft power to speak of. In Europe, there was the 17+1 framework where China tried to sort of get the Eastern European countries on its side, and that seems to have failed. So wouldn't we have to conclude that all these Chinese attempts to influence the world in its way and to make the world sort of come closer to China have actually failed?
As we say in the classics, yes and no. Let me give you the no first. And that is, what's China's global strategy? In a nutshell, in achieving many of the mission statements that we ran through before in the 10-part worldview, or at least the international dimensions of the 10-part worldview, are through China becoming the indispensable economic partner of us all. China is now, I think, Switzerland's third largest trading partner. It's Australia's largest trading partner. I mean, about 35% of Australian exports go to China. China, I think, is the largest trading partner of any significant economy in Asia. Became Germany's largest trading partner last year. So, the Chinese grand strategy, if I could put it in a nutshell, is to achieve 1 through 10 above without ever firing a shot anywhere, but by becoming the indispensable economic partner of us all, so that ultimately our national economic well-beings and by extension our corporate individual well-beings are dependent on our access to the Chinese market, access to the Chinese financial services market, in the case of Switzerland, the United States and some of the Europeans, etc. Because that ultimately produces what is almost said explicitly in the Chinese internal literature, using in Xi Jinping's term the gravitational pull, quote unquote, of the Chinese economy to leverage foreign policy compliance from the rest of the world. And if you look at it, up until about 2017, this was going not too badly. China was not being, there was no, until that stage, not much by way of wolf warrior diplomacy, 战狼外交. There was a reasonably effective strategy around the world, and then with the 16+1 as well. As China with the BRI in infrastructure projects across many of the East Europeans, etc., was seen as increasingly the indispensable economic power, both in trade markets but also in capital markets, as it began to become a much larger player. So I think what's gone wrong from the Beijing perspective is classic overreach. That is, and this I think is Xi Jinping's core failure, is that he, from the internal critique within the Chinese system, has gone too far, too fast, too hard, too early. That is, rather than just waiting for these processes to take their natural course over time, in the tradition of Deng Xiaoping, which is always to kick the can down the road and to allow these things to evolve organically, having taken core decisions, which is to open the Chinese economy, grow it, and then just see what the hell happened after that. Wasn't a bad strategy when you think back on it. To one which says, oh, you're giving us some trouble, you're criticising our human rights performances in Xinjiang. Well, let me tell you what we're going to do to you. And so when I see the range of bilateral coercive measures against the Norwegians over the Nobel Prize, against the Swedes over the Swedish national has been incarcerated in China, the European Union over the sanctions placed on the members of the European Parliament who objected to Chinese human rights practices in Xinjiang, through to the Australians, the massive tariff impositions against probably a third of Australian exports to China, probably a $20 or $30 billion loss in Australian exports. So against the Republic of Korea over Korea's decision to deploy THAAD systems, that's theatre anti-ballistic missile defense systems targeted against North Korea, not against China. But the Chinese objected to it for their own strategic reasons. Then Kia and other Korean car sales plummeted in China by huge numbers. And so these patterns of coercive Chinese economic diplomacy and then direct wolf warrior diplomacy, which is Chinese ambassadors taking to the airwaves around the world and attacking various countries for doing X, Y, and Z, A, B, and C. This, I think, has been a reflection of the new line under Xi Jinping, and I would agree with you. It has not advanced China's interests. So therefore, when I say yes and no, yes, the strategy about being the indispensable economic partner of everybody continues. No, because there's been political overreach by the regime at the same time, and particularly in the last several years.
朋友都知道我是很挑剔的，防晒乳我选 KISS 皇家呵护抗光清爽高防晒凝露，因为它有媲美蓝光神盾的抓藻植萃，保护我在阳光下延缓肌肤老化，维持青春弹力，可以防御工作环境里的3C 商品。各种光源对肌肤的伤害，擦起来清爽不黏腻。我特别喜欢它做到海洋友善，365天，天天抗光抗老化，是我的保养日常。你呢？呵护您，呵护全家人，专属你的 KISS Royal Care 抗光清爽高防晒凝露。